Hey everybody, and welcome back to our scenario playthrough series. We have reached the Added Attractions or Corkscrew Follies expansion pack, and this is scenario number 1 or 22 in our series. We have to get $170,000 in park value by the end of October year 3. Now this is the first park value one that we've had in a little while, so we are going to need to build up some rides and things to get our value up and continue to build, because if we do it all right away, it will depreciate over time. And while we can renew the rides, which is definitely a doable thing, it makes sense just to continue to build. Now, we don't have a ton of space here. This park is actually fairly challenging. It's a little bit narrow, and in order to do what we are trying to do, which is make a semi-realistic park build, it's fairly challenging to get a decent-sized coaster in here with the landscape as it is, and trying not to put things way up over the edge of the cliff. Obviously, as soon as you see a cliff, I'm sure you think dive coaster, and we'll certainly be fulfilling that need here a little bit later. But in the meantime, we got to get some other things in here, and one of the biggest benefits of our expansion pack now is that we have the ability to have new rides. The Virginia Reel is one of those, and while it's not super exciting, it's a nice historic ride type, and one that allows us to do just something a bit different. So it's a little bit of a spinning mouse, essentially, and it doesn't have a lot of features. Like, it doesn't have brakes, it doesn't have diving corners, it doesn't have any of the things that the real Virginia Reels had. But we'll make the best of it and do what we can and get ourselves something going here so we can get some peeps through the door and some revenue generating and take care of it from there. Now, we are going to take advantage of those couple of squares of land that we have over towards the edge of the ocean there. We've got 3 or 4 here in this instance, and it varies throughout the whole section. But we can raise the land in those sections and reclaim some of that ocean front for our cliffside property. Now, we're not going to do what we did here in the Thunder Rock playthrough where we reshaped the entirety of the map, but we are going to go through and give the whole edge of the cliff kind of a new look as we go through. We're also going to use that to reclaim some land for some flat rides and things, just so we don't have to cram it all in there in a way that just doesn't feel very nice. So that's the goal in general, is to make this in a way where it feels not totally cramped, but just kind of works in a pleasant way. So we are going to use a little bit of a square here and put some raised planters in these little pits here, so it sits a little more flush with the landscape. So that was something I actually pulled from Sammy's Fundamental Forest series, which, if you're interested in getting into more of the aesthetic type builds in the game, that's a good series to watch. I'll link it down below, and you can check that one out. But Sammy is teaching how to kind of go about park building from start to finish, and not using hacks or tile inspector or any of those things. So it's kind of a good fundamentals and basics, as the name may suggest. So definitely check that out if it's something that you are interested in. Now, you'll notice the Virginia Reel is raised up a little bit, and while I typically raise rides up off the ground because you don't want coasters on the ground, in this instance I've raised it a little bit higher because the intention is to eventually throw a ghost train underneath of it, another new ride, and try and stack things just a little bit, and that's just to kind of get that little bit of a seaside park feel where you have some of those compact locations where there might be a flat ride on the roof or something of that nature. A little bit hard to do without scenery and make that read properly, but we'll give it a shot anyway. Now, we're building a second carousel here, but we'll delete the first here in a second, but I thought the carousel would fit very nicely here onto this hillside. We also have a Ferris wheel right there on the edge of the cliff, which feels like there's no better place to put it than right there. We are trying to keep things largely kind of close to each other, I suppose, while not being right on top of each other. Mostly that gives us some space to work with elsewhere on the map, and we don't take up too much area with something pretty simple. So we'll give ourselves kind of this nice little build here just to start guests coming through the door. We will need to jump into a bigger coaster here soon just so that we can get some revenue going, because really the challenge we run into with something like this is that for park value we just need to keep building some fairly higher intensity type rides. So what we are going to do here is build ourselves a wooden coaster. Now we do get the Twister wooden coaster, the GCI style with the Millennium Flyer trains in the new expansion packs, but we don't have it unlocked just yet. So instead, we're going to build more of a classic out and back coaster here with a couple of hills and do sort of a double out and back. But the second lap isn't going to go all the way to the end; it'll finish a little bit early. But it's pretty simple ride here. It doesn't have to be too large to do what we want it to do. The challenge here is that we want to be cognizant of taking up a ton of space, which is why I've chosen the out and back, because really in a lot of cases this is just going to take a too wide section of track minus this turnaround, but the turnaround we can put stuff inside of it, which we'll do. So I wanted to go for the flat turnaround with the diving corner just because I feel like that always looks fairly nice. It's sort of a 50s, 60s style where Herb Schmeck from PTC was really kind of getting into that thing, and we started seeing more of these sort of diving drops after the turnaround. We're going to keep some low hills in here so we get some nice little bits of airtime and everything. The station, just for reference, is a placeholder. When I'm first building this, the station really doesn't matter usually in terms of location. All I want to do is put it there so I can get the ghost train running so that I can at least see what my pacing is going to look like. So what we've done here is extended it out that way because I can see based on where the lift hill comes down is that I can nest a smaller turn inside of this turnaround and put the station somewhere adjacent to the lift hill, parallel. And we've got this nice little strip of land here between the park boundary and the coaster lift hill that we can squeeze our last little bit in and come up and cross over those sections and line us up very nicely to come right back into the station. So what we're going to need to do, though, is move this pathway a little bit. And really, that path is just getting moved for convenience sake at this point. It's not in its final home. That will take a little bit of time here to figure out exactly where we want that to live. But now we can go ahead and put all this in, throw in a little S-bend right there, and put our station. And there we have it. We are pretty much set. So we just got to drop down here and into the brakes. And we can run 2 trains happily ever after. Now you'll see here we just don't have a lot of space to work with because this map is so darn narrow, which means that we're going to have to reclaim a little bit of land to get ourselves a entrance and exit, and also the queue and exit path and all that. In the meantime, though, I am putting a little bit of a tunnel here in the end and a little bit of a more extreme drop here at the end just to make something slightly more interesting to the layout. So trying to figure out how this buries in here and then comes up to this flat little corner. Now that flat corner, once you see a test, you'll see it goes a little bit fast, and we're going to eventually go ahead and modify that to make it look a little bit nicer. But for right now, we just need to get this thing up and running. I'm going to reduce the tunnel to 3 just for consistency's sake, and give it a little bit of a nicer look there with a sidewall and the top. So it kind of looks like maybe a rusty little tunnel, bit of theming and that sort of thing. So you can see here we're starting to reclaim a little bit of that land and look at doing this from a bit of an elevation change, so that way we can get our pathway underneath of the entrance and exit huts, and we can really just do this crossing here with a 2 wide section of path, so that way we can at the very least get it open, get it making money, and be good to go from that standpoint. So really, the test is just to make sure everything looks good, which it does. We got our nice 6-car trains, and that's going to help us out with capacity here. 2 trains as well, which is always nice. But here we go. We can build ourselves an exit path, and then we can build ourselves an entrance path, and we are all set. That way we at least have ourselves a working roller coaster here that we can start to generate some money from. So we'll connect all that up, and then we just got to connect it back to the main path again. Really, since it's so long and narrow, we just have a single path from one end all the way down to the other. A couple of plazas here and there, but nothing too special because we just don't have the space to do anything with it. So it's really just kind of becomes more of a clever placement of where the rides are in relation to that path, whether they're in front, whether they're behind, because I don't want the path to be right up against the cliffside the entire time, because that just gets kind of boring. And I feel like there's excitement to be had for having the cliff or the rides hanging right off the edge of the cliff. So we'll do that with some flat rides for sure. I did go with the whitewashed look on the wooden coaster just because it kind of has that seaside park feel to it. So the white paint on wooden coasters were typically to do a little bit of protection for them from the salt air. So that's typically what you saw. Now you don't usually see a lot of white painted wooden coasters anymore, only because the paint sometimes obscures imperfections on the wood or things that might need to get replaced. So it just makes inspection a little bit harder. So typically the natural wood look is preferred. But I do kind of like the striking color of the whitewash, especially when it's new and kind of looks nice and good. I always appreciate maybe some like chaser lights or something that go all the way around the coaster or on the lift hill or something like that, just because it has that nice classic feel to it. So we got to go back through now and place some of our benches, some of our trash bins, because we haven't done too many of that, and we have a couple of more intense rides here, and people are not being very nice to our environment here by tossing their litter on the ground. But we can fix that. We will hire some folks to do it. I typically don't like to hire a lot of people until we get further on and have more money, because really hiring staff at the beginning is just kind of a waste of your money. It doesn't really hurt your ride or your park value unless you're really egregiously messy or having other troubles out there. So in general, you can kind of deal with only having one handyman, one mechanic, and nothing else for at least the first good part of your build. And then once you start getting a better cash flow in there, it's easier to justify having a couple of more staff in there once we do get to that point. So not too bad, but we have ourselves a starting point here. Now, like I said earlier, we're going to use that turnaround on the coaster for an observation tower. Put a ride in there and make it look fairly nice. That turnaround really is just perfect for some kind of a flat ride because you can't really do a whole lot else in that area. So we might as well put it to use. Going to come back through here and build in a little bit of trees coming off of Rainbow Valley and Thunder Rock, where we really couldn't do trees necessarily. It is kind of nice to be able to have some options for that and options that we can remove when we decide we don't need them any longer. So I've got a couple of food stalls here. I'm going to fence in bits of this wooden coaster so nobody goes for a wander when they shouldn't. And now we're going to look at our first major reclamation project here, and this is going to be for a swinging ship. So one of the things that I wanted to do is have the swinging ship by the water, but I don't want it all the way down to the bottom because I just don't want to have my guests trekking all the way down there and having a section lower. I've seen this map done by several people on like a 2-tier setup, and it does kind of look good. It's a neat way to think about it, but at the end, we're going to keep everything more or less up top, but a little bit of elevation change here. So we've got ourselves that sort of variety of movement on those queues and on the pathways here. So like this, I'm doing a little bit of down, a little bit of up, a little bit of tunnel, just to get some variety in there. And I'm going ahead and raising the land on the sloped pieces so that I don't have to remove them later. For the flat ones, I can just bring the landscape up underneath of the pathway and it works just fine, but the other sections we can't do that quite yet. So I don't want to blow all of my money at the moment, so I'm just raising the necessary things. But now we've got a nice little viewing area here for the ride and for the ocean. Nice seating area there for the fries stall, and a queue that is almost probably as interesting as the ride itself. That will be a little bit hairy, I think, as you were standing right there at the edge of the map, kind of looking off of a pretty sizable drop down to the water. I feel like this would be an insurance company's nightmare maybe to insure this park, but anyway, somebody went for it. So I think the ship looks pretty good right here and sits very nicely here on the edge of that precipice. And you can see how we're blending in that reclaimed land into what we have on the rest of the map, and that's going to be pretty consistent throughout the rest of our build to do pretty much the same thing. So we will continue to kind of work that way, but you can see it's mostly just to make sure that we have the space to work with. So here I did a little bit of a test just to see what would happen if I wanted to move this coaster finale with a wider corner, because really what I wanted to do was a wider 6x6 corner and then have kind of a larger S-bend into the station and brakes, which we will get around to. In the meantime, I want to build a 3D cinema over here because it gives us some rain protection, and it also just gives us some soft guest gap and some park value. So all of those things are good to have, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And that lets us also move the scrambler over here, so that way we can clear out this space here, because it's time for our next track ride, which is going to be a log flume. A log flume and the wooden coaster always kind of go side by side to me. Just they're two classic attractions that always look nice together, I think. Now, while I wouldn't mind intertwining it with the wooden coaster, we're not going to do that here. It's going to stand on its own. But what I want to do is have a section of the flume that kind of sits high up off the ground and just kind of goes back and forth and then has the final drop. This is sort of a classic aerodynamics move on their log flumes, where you had kind of a lower section with the station, a lift pretty much immediately after the station, then a bunch of switchbacks up high, your drop, and then a turn right back into the station. So it definitely saves ground space, for one, and it also extends the ride while keeping a nice kind of view for your guests that are on the ride, and also for the ones that are off. So here's the kind of idea that you can see, and typically I try not to put too many straight sections on my flumes. I like to use those S-bends to give it a nice little smooth curve that winds back and forth with everything. And now it's just a matter of figuring out how we want to get our station and our kind of finale in as well. You can see there's a turn right after the drop, which is a big no-no. You always want a straight section after the drop to give a bit of a run out and slow things down. But right now, I'm thinking of reversing this whole thing, because it actually makes more sense to put the station right here, because we're already by the path. Then we can do our little turnaround right here with those double S-bends. Put the lift right back by the station there. Do our same kind of windy bit right here. And put back the whole thing. And have a drop at the far end on the back. This also lets us level it out, turn pretty much right into the station, because after your big finale drop, you don't want to be doing too much else. That was the thing that got everybody excited at the end, and you want everybody to come off on that high, so you don't want to keep wandering your ride around until everybody gets bored of it. So once you drop, you should get back to the station kind of as quickly as you can, without too much extra fuss. That's what we're going to do here. We're also going to put it in a bit of a tunnel. That way I have the wooden supports over top, and we have that little bit of interaction, not too much. There's more tunnel to come here as a look ahead. And then trying to figure out how our station exit and entry go in here. We can put the exit on the side. We just have to figure out how to wind it down. And then we can put our station right here and put a little bit of a queue adjacent to the ride. And this way we at least have sort of a temporary setup to start, and we can continue to build this back a little bit later on. Now I was looking to see if maybe we could shove like a swinging inverter ship inside some of the sections here of the flume, but we really couldn't, so in the end I thought a car ride might be more in line with what can fit right here. So we're going to do this little bitty car ride and start with this whole thing, and pretty much immediately regret this just because it's so short that all of our stats are going to be trash. So in the end we're going to redo this in just a little bit, but first drop into a couple of trees and some bushes and kind of landscape this whole thing out a little bit. We're going to put in some water a little bit later here just because we have the space for it. But the thought process now is maybe if we put this bottom section in a tunnel as well. First of all, it gives an interesting way to start the flume because you don't just meander around outside. You get this kind of interesting sort of swampy tunnel going through there, which I feel like I always have that great kind of sights and smells of old parks with their log flumes that have their little underground tunnels and everything, always sort of musty and chlorine type smelling, but I don't know, very nostalgic I suppose. But this also allows us to put a car ride up on top here, and now we can get a much longer layout and something that has a little bit more interaction too. So that's what we're going to aim for here and try and get our station down here in the end. We've had our fair share of struggles with the car ride here through the last couple of maps. Thunder Rock went okay. Rainbow Valley was a difficulty for sure. But in the meantime, before we finish that up, I want to throw in a double swinging inverter ship. This is a nice park value boost for one, and it just looks cool. Also feels like one of those seaside park sort of things, an old Huss Ranger, which is what these rides are based off of. So we're going to do 2 of those side by side. We're going to go with some bright red and yellow colors. I can never figure out what to color these, so it's always just one of those, take your best guess sort of things. And I like the red and the yellow. It stands out very nicely. I feel like you could always go more menacing with like a black or a silver or something. But in the end, we're going to go with the red and the yellow, get that up and running. And now we're looking good for that. Helps us keep pushing our park value up a little bit because we don't want to get it too far behind and have to do too much there at the end. So now I'm going to lower this whole thing down so I can actually bring our exit through here, because I never connected the exit for that Flume, which is not so good. A lot of guests getting pretty upset with me there, but that's probably understandable, I suppose. So now we fix that, and we can put in a little bit of fencing and some bushes and dirt and grass and all that. I feel like dirt and grass is definitely the MVP land type just for my use. It just adds a lot of nicer texture and everything else, and really it's very, very useful for transitions between spaces. So highly recommend, if you'd never given it a try the dirt and grass. I think it will look very good. So now we realized that we need another coaster here to really get our money cranking, especially if we're going to want to raise up a bunch of land to fix that up. So in the end, the decision was a dive coaster, which should not shock anybody here with that nice size cliff there on the edge. So the only question now is, what does it look like? So we've got this drop, got a little lift hill that runs up to the thing. And now it's just trying to figure out how it goes. So one of the tests here, and I did a quick test here with 0 clearances just to see how it fit, was if we go diagonal, do we have the space up against the park edge? And the answer is no, but the other answer is we can move this whole drop. And if we're going to go diagonal, we can actually put it over here, where if we went forward, it would run right into the map boundary. But if we put it on this side, we can actually fit ourselves a diagonal climb, and it actually works very well because it goes into the land. We don't want just super high track up off the ground over the water. It wants to fit a little bit more aesthetically into the mountainside, so you want to kind of mirror the overall elevations of your landscape next to it. Sort of terrain coaster 101, I suppose. And this is really a terrain coaster, even if the terrain is a sheer cliff, but it is still part of it. I'm going to create a little bit of a cut in the landscape there that we're going to use for our drop here initially, and try something at least a little bit different there. Now we can place our station, knowing that a lot of that's going to be reclaimed land there as well. So now the question is how to finish it. Again, we don't really have many options for these drop coasters, just because there are no real inversions besides the small loop, which is pretty much entirely useless on this type of ride. So the only thing that we can do is sort of a modified Oblivion or G5 layout without inversions, and really that just means a big vertical drop plus something else. And that something else should not typically be very long. It's usually a turnaround or a figure eight or something fairly simple overall. So what we're going to do here is try to figure out how to do a turnaround. So I'm trying a couple of different things. The pacing looks pretty nice up onto the cliffside there. Doesn't need to be too fast, but it works fairly well for what our purposes are. And now I'm looking at maybe if we could do a helix in here. That could be a nice way to give ourselves a little bit more length, but in the end it doesn't really make sense. So we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to do a nice little turnaround here, a diving drop, and then right into the brakes. We can have enough brake room space now for an entrance station and an exit station, and also the proper brake run that we need too. So that will let us run 3 trains. So this thing will be a capacity hog, which is great. Always like that. You can see we did something a little bit unique with the carrot, or the take a shot. That was called the Ferris wheel carousel once again, but having that crossover at the front of the drop there for the dive coaster, which I've removed here for a moment because we're going to use that for the queue for the dive coaster itself, because that seems like it's the most appropriate fit for that whole space. So now I'm just doing a little bit of path rerouting, and now you can see that drop come in here. Feels like that would be kind of a neat way to experience that with the coaster kind of shooting all around. You do have a little bit of oddness with RCT where the visual of the train looks a little bit larger than the square that it sits on. So in reality, this would not exactly pass clearance test. Those guests on the end seats would be in for a bad day, but in the end, that's what we are given here, so we're going to, in general, go with it. If I'm building custom scenery, I'm usually going to give it a little bit of leeway on either side, but in this instance, I think we're just going to be fine. Now I've taken my Ferris wheel and decided to lower it just a little bit with a bit of raised land here, but it moves it farther away from the dive coaster and lets us get a proper queue in there, and also kind of terrace our seating area up there on the plaza, so there's a little bit more to see that's not getting blocked by the Ferris wheel. So now we're doing a pretty good job at this point in terms of making money, and our park value is doing pretty well too. So we got 2 major coasters and the smaller one as well, the Virginia Reel that we started with. But one great way to get a lot of park value is double towers. And because we got 2 modes, you get the upward launch and the downward launch. We got the space shot and the turbo drop from S&S. So those always fit nicely side by side. Now, typically I will stagger them, but in this instance it fits right up nicely against the corner of the map, and we don't want to lose any space there in the back, even though in the end it really doesn't matter, but in this instance I feel like side by side is the thing that works best. So we'll go ahead and do that, get some queue in here, and now we've basically built front to back on either end of this map. So now it's just a matter of kind of filling in the middle stuff and cleaning it up from there. But we are well on our way to a victory here, and now it's just a matter of kind of cleaning it up, making it look good, and getting the rest of the attractions in. So I think that's going to be it for today. We'll finish up here with our queues for these 2 rides so we can open these up. But come back and join us for part number 2, where we will expand the rest of the rides, we will add some more reclaimed land to our space, and finish up the park. So until next time, thank you all very much for watching. Bye now.